if I was giving advice to someone who was a new DM, and they were saying, right, I'm studying all of the rules, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, I would probably, first thing I would say to them is relax. The rules are there, and having a basic grasp of the rules is helpful. But there is not one dungeon master I have met that knows all of the rules and can
Yeah,
recite
me
them
neither.
instantly. It is
No,
impossible.
me
There are
neither.
so many nuances. There are so many rules that don't even exist for the things that the players ask me sometimes. So to
Absolutely.
me, like, as long as you have an understanding of what you are running, as long as you understand what your players can do and have their sheets beforehand and can see, right, this is the base of what they're going to be able to do in combat, then to me, you are set for a session. It's not about studying up every single rule and making sure that you can lawyer every single fact that someone has put in there, because it doesn't work like that. For me, especially with the way I run games, I stick to the rules, but I'm quite relaxed on them if it means a good moment in my game. We are there to tell a fun story, and if I can bend a rule slightly to let a player do a thing that's going to create this amazing moment, then absolutely. It's another
Do you
thing that
have
I
kind
would
of
say
like,
to
yeah,
go on.
do you have kind of like an example for like a concrete example how that played out on the table once in a while with your players, where
Okay,
you
yeah.
really kind of
So
like went that direction?
there are one of my groups currently. They had they had sending stones. So basic walkie talkies is the way that they were described to them. um, and they were separated because we were doing water deep dragon heist, so a lot of investigation. They were separated into two groups, and one of them had turned into a mouse as a druid, and
That's good.
they
That's
were
great.
trying to communicate. And the way that I bent the rule was that I let the groups talk to each other instead of one person communicating via the sending stones. I used it as a walkie-talkie as such, and I let the ranger had speak with animals, so was translating what the mouse or rat was saying through the walkie-talkie,
Oh,
so that
that's
everyone
awesome.
could understand what was happening and what he was seeing when he was sneaking around. And I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say when they're trying to do this and it's a fun moment and it's cool that no, actually, only two people can speak through it, and that is it, because it
Absolutely.
made a good moment.
Absolutely. And also, especially for new players, draws you in the possibility. I mean, at some point, every new player will come to a point where, the rule for sending stone is really different. But but for that fun moment, just to draw in what the possibilities is on this great game,
Exactly that.
makes it much more fun. Well, thank you for that. But so in terms of playing with new players, do you always do you make big campaigns, and what does this entail, or do you more one shot? What is kind of like your first outset
So
when you bring a group together?
so the plan that I had for this is to run them all through a campaign. Um, I The first campaign I did was Curse of Strahd with the newer
Nice.
players,
Nice.
because I've always wanted to run Curse of Strahd and I'd never run it,
Yeah.
um, which is a great campaign. And then my other two groups, I basically gave them a choice of the. I wanted to do pre-written modules because I haven't done them for a while. I at my base do homebrew, um, so because I had this time and I wanted to do this with the newer players, I decided, right, I'm going to do some of the pre-written modules because I haven't done them. They're a lot of fun. It makes it easier for me to not have to plan as much because I'm not having to make stuff up on the fly. Um, so I gave them 3 or 4 that they can choose from, and we did a poll, and they decided which module they wanted to do. For me, a one shot isn't enough to give someone a grasp of falling in love with D&D. And I know anyone that's interested and stays along for for maybe 3-4 sessions, 5 sessions, will fall in love with D&D. A one-shot can go well, it can go badly, dependent on player involvement and interaction and understanding. If you're doing a 4-hour adventure for them, and it takes them 3 hours to figure out what's actually happening, that last hour can be magical, but they might think every D&D session is that first 3 hours. Whereas if you run a campaign, the first 2 sessions are a bit iffy and it's a bit slow and everyone's taking their time to get used to stuff.
Yeah.
But from then on, it turns into my players now the ones I'm running for now would say they're very new D&D players. I would call them semi-experienced D&D players now. They can manage their way through a campaign. They can manage a character to a certain level. They can level up. So for me, a campaign makes a lot more sense in that regard.
Absolutely. So when you kind of like, especially with new players, you start always with level 1, as you said. What does that? Can you kind of like step through what actually this first experience is and what you were thinking about? The first kind of like frame of the picture where you lead people to. Don't need to spread the campaign that you're doing now, but since you have done it so much, especially for new masters, what is your first thought about how? Because there's a typical tavern scene, right? That is a very convenient way to do it. But what's the way how you think about it when leading into a new campaign with new players?
So obviously it's dependent on which one I'm doing and what game I'm running. But the tavern scene is it's a cliche for a reason because it works and it's easy. So my first thought, I once we've decided what module we're running, I'll read through the book. I'll have a quick skim if I don't know it already. And my thought of it is, so for Curse of Strahd, you can't do a tavern scene, you end up in Barovia. Yes, I did a tavern scene with a difference. I didn't do Death House, which is at the beginning of. I didn't do Death House, which is at the beginning of Curse of Strahd. We started that at level. We started Curse of Strahd at level 3. And they woke up in an abandoned tavern, just in the woods in Barovia. They woke up in this tavern, not knowing each other, and there was a box in the middle of the room with some tarot cards in it, one for each of them. So my initial plan is, how do I grip them in a first session? What is interesting? So if I'm doing a tavern scene, my first thought is, right, most of them don't know each other as characters. It would be quite hard for me, it's quite hard to organize a group of people knowing each other beforehand when they don't actually know each other as characters. So for me, it's, okay, they're brand new players. They're all in a tavern. I will message them and say, what would your character be doing? They're in a tavern. What would they be doing? What would you look as your character? Are they just entering the tavern because they've had a long hike from somewhere? Are they sitting getting drunk? Are they playing cards? And I will work with the players to figure out what they want to do. And that will give them some confidence then when I go and do these small sort of vignette sections at the beginning of the session. And I'll go to player 1. What do we see when you look at your character and what are they doing? And they have that confidence of us having that conversation already and just telling me. And straight away they're role playing and they don't even realize it.
That's beautiful.
So it sort of ushers that into having that confidence to just say, oh, well, I'm just sitting and I'm getting drunk and I'm with a group of people. Okay. So, and then I will start the role play from there. And then normally for me, it's something happens in the tavern. All the NPCs flee. You are the only ones left. What are you going to do?
Perfect.
They're chucked into a situation. They see there are 4 or 5 other people there. That forms a group.
That is perfect. That's beautiful. For me, it's the same way. I have adapted over the years also kind of like different styles of starting, because the tavern scene it really works. But for me, I mean, another lazy way, if you could call it, is of course immediately start with battle. and go and go
Yep.
and go and go into that. But your way was a very elegant way. I really like, because it has actually nothing to do with the tavern. It is a tavern per se where they are, but in the end, the circumstances just make it more kind of like how I like it. Just to begin somewhere, but
I think it
somewhere out
feels
there.
more natural.
Yeah.
That these characters could have just been in a tavern at some point, and it doesn't have to be a tavern. We normally start it in a tavern because it's a thing with fantasy games and fantasy scenes that you see that everyone goes to a tavern. But you could start it in a market. You're all in
Yes,
a market
absolutely.
and you're buying this or you're working there or you're doing that, and this happens. What are you all
Yeah.
going to do?
Yeah.
What are some ways that you've done yours then?
Well, what I have done is basically in one scene where they are already in the middle of a how you call it, ruin. So the outset was Eberron, and it was kind of like
Hmm.
my second campaign. A little bit, the schedule was a little bit lighter than my other campaign, so I could actually fit it in. But I started, and the outset of the group was basically that they are looking for ruins and valuable items, stuff like that. Started at level 3, so it's more an experienced group. But they were in the
Hmm.
middle of a ruin already starting, and I think with the new group, that kind of like is not yet going into understanding what I can do with an environment. We're in the middle of a deep ruin excavation. I think it's much more difficult. But with those guys, it was very natural and very easy to go, because they immediately could sink into the characters, because that was their base motivation. Because I felt, if I now start first with a tavern, it just takes too long until they're really doing what they really are doing. Then they have their RP,
Yeah.
obviously, and I wanted just the players to have the moment immediately at the first second. We're doing what our characters are set out to do, to investigate, find new discoveries, be the first finder of some resource or whatever. That is really what they really were digging. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like that. That makes sense. You're straight into the action and you're
Yeah.
not messing about. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, I love that, because you. The question is always, what is the motivation about the players, and how can I put them already immediately in that situation, session one? But I also do though understand from an introductory standpoint, because especially with new players, you can really, as you said with your vignettes, beautifully done, is how introduce yourself. What do we see? What do the others see? What is the other characters? That makes a lot of sense for me too, especially with newer players. That's fascinating. So, with you starting kind of like a live stream, and as far as I understood, with new players, what is the motivation behind for you to do that, and how did you bring people that kind of like not played it to kind of like expose themselves into a
So
live stream environment?
the the stream is with players that I have already introduced. So it's not newer players
Ah,
that are,
okay,
they're
okay. Then
not
I
brand new.
misunderstood. Yeah,
They're not brand new, but they're players from games that I've got ongoing. But I see you see them every week, and you watch them role play, and you watch them just. It amazes me with some of the groups that I have, just the ability for some people who have never done it before to jump in and role play a character within 5 minutes
yeah,
and just be in that character. And it is mind blowing. And I've got great groups of people. I've got brilliant individuals that I play with every single week. And for me, I always wanted to go back to my homebrews. And that's what I've done for a long time. That all took a break with friends because of life getting in the way, marriages, kids. That's when I started doing what I'm doing now. But it was always with the aim to go back to homebrew. And some of the players that I play with are just that good that I would be absolutely honored to make a world for them and run them through a complete
beautiful.
homebrew experience. And that's what it was always going to be to start off with. And then I just feel like a stream would be a lot of fun. It's nice to engage with people. It's nice to sort of, not to say that we're going to become massive. No one's ever going to be the next Critical Role. But
That's hard. Yes.
to just have, if 20 people watch us every week and we have this little small following of people that watch us. That's a nice thing. People we can engage with, people that take an interest. And I watch these people role play every week, and they are hilarious. I am in fits of laughter watching them. So I think people will enjoy watching them in that regard.
That's beautiful.
And that's the motivation. The motivation is to go back to homebrew and do what I'm used to doing and do what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But then if people can watch us doing that, because I think our games are very watchable, then why should we not put it out there and see what happens?
That's amazing. I just love your kind of like deep empathy for players, just bringing them forth, because it's very similar to me. I mean, it's hilarious how many times we have almost every 2 weeks a game, and we play it for a long time. So we have always brunch on Saturday, and then we play it for 5 to 6 hours. And there are scenes which is really kind of like a full episode of a series, like 45 minutes role play, and I'm just sitting there as a master, just enjoying myself, having kind of like.
And I love that. And
love it.
To me, that's a good DM that doesn't feel that they need to interject or move the game on in any way, shape, or form. If the players are doing that, one, I'm having a break, which is nice. Two, just watching them, this movie unfold before my eyes with these players role playing these funny scenes or deep emotional scenes. There are DMs I've personally been a player for that would have cut half of that and tried moving the scene on.
Absolutely.
To me, sit and watch them. Let them thrive. Let them do what they need to do.
Yeah. I was definitely that DM as well in the beginning. I definitely had always the feeling I need to move it from scene to scene to scene, and I with the response of the players, I really learned over the years to just let them, because it goes somewhere, because you can't have everything under control, and you should not have everything under control. You should because you are just one equation of building the story. You are not the importance piece. You're just here to facilitate, basically. And that is so important, because I always believe that the reason why sometimes, and that's not always the reality, but I always read a lot of Reddit in the DM space, in the game mastering space, and I always see kind of like this adversity of the DM is not allowing this, and they're always kind of like on the let's say kind of like on the antagonist side, which is completely not true, right? We are both. We are your friend and foe at the same time. We are the world.
Exactly.
We are the deities, but we are also the commoner around the corner, selling bread. And I think the beautiful thing about that is to just let it flow, is because there's another thing for me as a master. The direction they're going, I can actually prepare. In the meantime, in the 40 minutes, I just start to prepare.
Exactly. It's perfect. It gives us, and it's completely true what you said. A lot of players, especially players that haven't DM'd, think that we are trying to kill them and we are just against them and we are the bad guys. Actually, I'm rooting for them in every step, in every adventure, in every scene. I am rooting for them. But if I don't put people there to try and kill them, then there's no fear, there's no threat, there's no meaning to it.
Absolutely. How much?
And I say it all the time. Like, go on.
How much does it hurt you, the rolls? Because it does for me. When you really roll in disadvantages to the player, that really gets there to the edge of getting very dangerous. How much hurts that you? How hurtful is that for you?
To me, it's in a fine balance. Yes. I enjoy the fact that they are so into it that they are frightened.
Yeah.
that kind of, in a weird way, gets me going. I like the fear in the player's eyes, but I also don't want to kill them.
Yes.
And I've had player deaths recently and was nearly in tears asking them that moment of, please tell me what you see in your last moments. Yes. And I lump in my throat and I felt horrible. But that little bit of fear behind the eyes.
There needs to be.
That little bit, that scared moment where you can see, oh shit, my character that I've held on to for this long is going to die, and I've put everything into them.
Yeah.
I do like that a little bit. I will be honest.
Well, yeah, me too. But I remember one situation in my the first kind of like 3 years campaign. Now we're in the second, where one of the characters, they were on an ocean, and kind of like fiery tornadoes came up, and they had kind of like let's call it minion, like a pet NPC. How they do, right? You never plan that this is going to be their pet NPC, but it's going to, for them it was like 10 seasons, 10 episodes. It was their pet, and so the one guy wanted to save it, right? And they were like around level 6ish or something, so it's a very tough situation. He had kind of like occasional flying, and he could swim a little bit, but it was a very dangerous situation because he was pulled into this fire tornado. I made 3 rolls out of it because and the DC just increased. It started with 14, then it started with 18, and then it went to 22. The last one, because he failed everyone, so he pulled everything in. And the last one, he did on the dot 22. It was not a natural 20, but it was on the dot. He was DC 22 and saved himself. And that's it. But the fun part of this, that player said, well, if I died, I died. You know, I love that character. We all love the character, but then it's just part of the story. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's sometimes moments like that specifically, it's like there are real dice gods, and they do exist, and they are just scaring us just for a moment.
Yes.
And then when you get that last roll and it's on the dot what they needed, you can't. It's unbelievable.
I celebrate that, and celebrate so much, but at the same time also just this conscious to have, okay, somebody died, and you know how fragile that situation is for the player, for the table. And just be, as a DM, very clear, because you can't just gloss over it, because some have played those characters for years. But even if you just played it for 2 weeks, players get very invested in their characters, get very invested. Yeah,
they do, and it's one thing. To any of my players will watch this. I'm not trying to kill any of you. I'm not. I love them all. I love every single one of them characters. But you know,
it needs to have.
If you weren't close to dying, then you wouldn't care so much about them.
Yeah, but there are also great stories to be told if somebody dies. What can happen afterwards? There's always a chance to continue that story in a different way. That's so great. I love that too. I love that so much about being new or existing players. Those experiences that they put to the table, because that's for me the biggest beauty about DMing is not the whole preparation, even though I like it, and building a world and giving them kind of like a platform to explore. It is those moments that they have between themselves and really grow as a group and as individuals, and have those, my players now started really also using resting opportunities to really have also role play opportunities. That was in the beginning, of course, just mechanical for a lot of people. It's just like, okay, rest, okay, let's continue. But now they use the opportunity also to just develop the group themselves. Just beautiful just to see. And I think for me, it is really a nice Saturday afternoon, to be honest. I have a series. I notched them in some directions. And then let's go.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. As I said earlier, like the moment to be able to not have to do, because I do voices with my role play and NPCs and all that stuff. So the ability to watch them for 45 minutes is great anyway, because I don't have to think as much. I can plan stuff that's going to happen in a bit. I can reread over notes that I've made. But also to just watch those developments, watch those relationships build, watch those character arcs slowly forming. Just it's stuff that you will sit and in 5 years' time, some of these moments I will still be thinking about.
Absolutely. I treasure them.
Because they were so amazing.
I treasure them so much. But there's another opportunity. You can steal ideas from the players, because sometimes they talk something about it and you're like, oh, that is actually a much better idea. That is actually
my players do not understand how many times they have said, "Oh, don't say that in front of the DM," and I'm just making notes. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. Absolutely.
With a twist, though.
Oh, you better. Always with a twist. Always. So it doesn't look like I've stolen their idea, but that was the basis of it. Absolutely. It's so they get themselves in trouble so many times with saying stuff. And there is one tip that I watched on a Matt Colville video that I watched, which is that he will make a sort of puzzle room, for instance, but he won't come up with a solution to the puzzle. He will wait until the players come up with one that he really likes.
Beautiful.
And then that's, ta-da, they managed to solve it.
That's absolute. That shows the security, because this is the thing. I have still this with puzzles that I still laid out, but every time I discard it because the players have anyway a better solution to the puzzle than I came up with, and it's much more elegant, much more beautiful. But I need to have that confidence that he has, because I still don't have it. I feel very insecure. I still need kind of like in the backhand the solution to feel secure, because puzzles is like a fickle thing. The main problem that I always see with puzzles is that this is the one instance where a lot of players get very meta because they want to solve it as the player and forget that their characters have abilities with roles to solve actually the puzzle. The player wants to solve it, right? That gets always really funny. Yeah.
It's why I have never included a riddle in any of my games. I've never included any sort of word puzzles, because the player that does know the answer, their character doesn't, because they've got the lowest intelligence and can just about speak common, let alone anything else. And then the people that should have the high intelligence haven't clocked it in real life. So I will never include like linguistic word puzzles in my games. There was one puzzle that, again, this is recent. We did a one-shot. So I've got 3 groups, and we've got a Discord channel with all of them people in. So then I throw one-shots for them, and I told you when we was in London that I was doing a battle royale for them. That has just finished yesterday.
So nice.
But we did a one-shot, and it was only a third-party one. It was a circus one-shot, and there was a mirror puzzle in it. And that mirror puzzle made me not want to ever do puzzles ever again in my life.
Tell me why. Why?
It was the most frustrating thing I have ever done. It was funny, it was hilarious, and it's one of the best one-shots that I've ever done. But for 45 minutes, basically the puzzle was that you go through the first mirror, and then the second mirror, then the third mirror, then the fourth mirror, then the fifth mirror, and they take you to different rooms. Okay. And you do them in order. But they just started, and I thought they would all, as a group, go through a mirror, realize it's the wrong mirror, eventually figure it out. What they actually did, because they're players and they don't do what the DM ever wants, is they basically split and went into completely different mirrors.
Yes, that's always the problem, right? Sometimes you totally forget that that's going to happen.
Yes. So there was a specific plan on which mirror took them to which room next. So I had this spider diagram of which room each person was in for 45 minutes. And about 10 minutes into it, one of them said, I bet because they had A, B, C, D, E, and F were above each of the doors, but in different languages. And some of them understood them, some of them didn't. And one of the players actually said, I bet we just go through A, then B, then C, then D, then E, then F. About 10 minutes in.
Oh, wow.
And if they'd have followed that, it would have been easy, and I would have carried on doing stuff like that. But instead, I'm pretty sure I'm now going bald because of that.
Well, I mean, that is, and I also agree. I like puzzles a lot, and I always think they got better because I really want to have some of the puzzles in there, but that they really try to solve it as characters and not the players themselves, because I know they always want, and they have always those meta discussions, because a lot of puzzles don't need to be actually logically, or mechanically in real world terms to be solvable.
Yeah.
It just needs to be solvable with the abilities that the character has. And I think that it's always really difficult that some players and masters, just to say, have to really still stick to the environment.